How's it going, everybody? Wanted to go through and do just to talk about a bunch of little-ish or big-ish things that have kind of been on my mind pretty much since the release of Hidden Trials. Talking about a bit of the elephant in the room, if you will. I had a video about this earlier. I didn't really like my tone when I thought about it a bit more. I thought it came off a little bit more negative than I really intended to on some of these decks. But um, how are you guys enjoying the set? I've had a lot of fun with it so far. I just counted a Materia Hunter before this. I have built 36 decks since the start of this set, which is awesome. Like, that's super, super cool. I'm having a lot of fun playing games and reasoning through things. I haven't won locals or anything since because I'm, messing around with stuff and trying to learn and trying to get ready for, in particular, like the Nationals formats, the two deck formats, which I think are like the most important ones for this set, and kind of why Hidden Trials is such an important set to begin with. Which is why I kind of want to talk about two of the most prominent decks to be kind of coming out of this set. I talk about them a little bit in the talk on the list that came out of Portland, but they're Chaos and they're the Hythlodaeus Turbo decks. And I guess we could talk about like kind of each of these individually. I will say, just out front, getting ahead of it, I am not fans of these decks. That's not necessarily. I'm not trying to make anybody mad. If you really enjoy these decks, that's great. That's why multiple decks are made. I don't like what some of these decks do, so I want to talk just a little bit about like the deck itself. What it does is a bit of an overview, some counterplay, and at the very, very end of the video, if you are like morally opposed to Ghoul talking about bans, because a lot of people are, I want to talk a little bit about like what if I am Hobby Japan, what I would do in the situation the game is in, and why I think that these cards are scary to have in the format for the long term health of both the game and even just Hidden Trials as a whole. So just like get all that out of the way with. If you're like predisposed to not doing that, you just want to hear Ghoul the competitive player's thoughts and not Ghoul the fake game designer putting himself in the shoes of Hobby Japan. Just like skip the last little bit of the video. I'll like mention it again there. But let's talk a bit about these decks. So if you haven't seen these decks, I can go into the all tournaments view, and we're going to talk a bit about Chaos first. And this is probably one of the best variants of it. There's a variant that is just like, I think it's just Earth Water, or like Earth Water Lightning. Yeah, it's on Earth Water Lightning because it's playing like Roche just to do more damage. But if you haven't read it, the new Chaos from the set is an absurd card. And they tried to design Chaos in a way where, so when Chaos enters the field, you get to remove 5 Chaos or monsters and you break them from the game. This doesn't target, doesn't choose, it just happens on resolution. You can remove them from the game. If you do so, your opponent basically is Famfreted and Sephiroth. They sacrifice the forward they control, and they discard 2 cards. And this is the cheapest discard 2 in the entire game, excluding even like Chaos Arc, unless there's a Shantoto on the field, right? And even more so than that, Chaos costs 4, so it's like a really easy number to hit early. And they said, well, 5 monsters and, stuff, that's like quite a few. Let's give them a special that feeds into it. So the special is you put the top 10 cards of your deck into the break zone as cost, and you do your point of damage. Which then means those 10 cards are in the break zone, so you can remove monsters and job chaoses from the game, so on and so forth. I think that the concept behind Chaos's design is really fine in a vacuum. Where this card gets really scary is this deck runs 12 copies of Chaos with the intent of going turn 1 Chaos special twice to do 2 points of damage, pretty much guarantee mill a Raijin and a Fujin. These little Narcomoeba boys that come in, those they come into play. They attack twice. You've now taken 4 points of damage. You're dead next turn, and you've discarded 2 cards as well. So even if you do something like Shantoto, you've taken 4 points of damage. You've ditched your entire hand and discarded 2 cards. They have to just like find anything to end the game. Pretty like basic, but it's a really frustrating play pattern. And in part because the Mill 10 feeds a lot of cards that just like punch you very, very fast. Gilgamesh BE with Warrior of Light is in here, with the idea being that like you can go like going second, Chaos, Pitch Pitch. I think that puts you on 2 in hand, and then like next turn you like Gilgamesh BE for game, and attack 3 times. And so what's the counterplay to this deck? How do you beat this deck? There's a couple things. The most common thing that we saw in Portland is our good friend EX Burst. Decks like Knights have already kind of started pushing decks higher and higher up the burst count. We're starting to see decks basically like if you're not trying to do something to end the game quickly, you're playing upwards of 20 or 25 bursts to combat the decks that are playing that. Which is, I mean, I don't, when it's 20 or 25 bursts, it doesn't feel like luck anymore when bursts happen. Which is, I think, a fair enough point. I think bursts can feel really random when there's like 3 random bursts in the deck that like win the game, but like nothing else. Like people used to run like 3 Levy, Lev 6 for, you know, whatever reason. In a deck that had like no other bursts, and they would hit it and it'd be like, oh, cool. When there's like 20 other bursts in the deck, I think it feels less bad. What I don't like about it is how restrictive it feels. For instance, in Opus 23, we had, what is this? 100 and some cards. And if you, 113 cards. And if you're only filtering for cards that have a burst, you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cards. I mean, you don't have a choice. Like, you just, like, to beat decks like this, you have to play a high burst count. And then your engine cards that, like, win the game don't have to have bursts. The pretty classic example of a card that, like, just completely demolishes this deck, if you hit an early Lev 6, you can put the Raijin back in hand, and you can put the Chaos on the bottom of the deck. They suddenly are in a much, much worse position because they lost their forward. They're not dealing you points of damage anymore. You kind of just almost like win the game on the spot by hitting Lev 6 into damage. Casting Lev 6 is still okay, but it's not like amazing. The other thing that like can be interesting counterplay, if you can survive the first turn that it happens, which is hard because Chaos also removes a forward. Remove the EX Burst filter. I think Lightning decks really might benefit from starting to run this X-Death, even if your engine doesn't want to remove the Breakzone from the game. They're going to be milling, 10 to 20 cards. They want their Breakzone to have cards in it. This, if they don't hit the Dark Chaos with the Earth card in hand, can just kind of like solo the deck in a way. You get a big 10k, they have to remove something, and they just kind of can bleed out over time. I haven't seen a ton of him last set or this set like so far, and like but like a lot of the Water Lightning builds were just stacking bursts. Really, that's like the main counterplay. Bursts, Mist Dragon, really, really good against the deck. Using it as a way to, they go for the discard 2 off of it. Like you check the break zone, see what they have, hit like a Raijin Fujin, Mist Dragon on top of it, make them have the second Chaos in hand. The deck can kind of lose to itself brick wise because like it's playing only 2 searchers for Chaos, and then like it has to like go backup searcher into Chaos into have another copy of Chaos in hand with like, and they're playing what is this? 10 dark cards. It can be kind of tricky to actually resolve that. Um, so really, once you get the first Chaos off the field, it's very hard for them to find the second one. And at that point, it's just dealing with the Fusion, the Raijin, and then not dying to a Gilgamesh that comes out of nowhere. And there's ways of doing all of that. I think the deck is really strong, but it is thankfully like pretty linear in what it does. Uh, I'm not as scared of this deck long term as I am of this guy, which is Hythlodaeus. If you haven't seen it before, I recommend going to the YYT's YouTube. Steve has a really good, like 40-minute video on Hythlodaeus, and he talks about it and explains what this deck is. And effectively, it's possible to use Hythlodaeus' effect, gain enough card advantage off of it, and hitting specific cards that you can almost deterministically do Hythlodaeus' effect again. And then that hits the right types of cards to where you can do the Hythlodaeus again. And you can do this probably 4, 5, 6 times until you've gone through. You've played 8 or 9 forwards to the field. You haste in Alua. Alua gives all of your forwards haste, and then you swing out, and the game ends. And I think this deck, first of all, it doesn't feel like a Final Fantasy deck. Steve is very generous, and I do agree with a little bit of what Steve says about the deck, which is that it's cool that there is a Final Fantasy deck that fills a new, a new archetype or thing that a deck does, which is we've never really had I start to do my combo and I win the game deck to this degree before. At least not to this power level. The two closest were, there was the Cloud Pod OTK, where you would have to just go turn 1, play Ramza. If the Ramza lives, you can play Pod Cloud and the game is over. Or the other one is the what was it? The Tillicaloop deck, sorry. The Ico, or the Valid 4 loops that would like get all of your forwards back to your hand, and then you would mill your opponent with Zidane and win the game. Those are like still doable, but I think those are a lot healthier than the Hythlo is. In part because Hythlodaeus pivots through Realm, and Realm is the source of haste for the deck. So you go here. Realm pulls out 2 monsters, one of cost 1, one of cost 2. The cost 1 you pull out is a haste goblin, so you can haste in the Hythlodaeus on the turn you play it. Means that you don't have to have this 9k survive a turn, not get dull frozen. But the other card that it gets is Cleone. And what this means is that for the rest of the game, it's very difficult to interact with you using summons. You have to cast a summon. The effect of your first summon effectively becomes your opponent draws a card. It's a very it's a very Yu-Gi-Oh-ish card, to be quite honest. They've really liked this like replacement effect type thing recently. But if you don't like Amaterasu the Realm, you cannot cast summons until you clear the Cleone. Which in some decks don't have a way of clearing Cleone, and actually a lot of the best ways of clearing Cleone tend to be summons. So you have to have like 2 summons to interact, and there's just not that many non-summons that can stop the combo. And a lot of the ones that do, if they come from forwards less than 8,000 power, Emmett Selk actually kills them when Hythlo enters the field, which is so funny. I really love Emmett Selk's like text, the way the card works. I think he's really cool in the way that he works both generically and as a combo / engine enabler, but it is very frustrating the way that he protects the field from things like Refia. If you let's say that you go like you're against the combo deck, they go turn 1, there you go. Turn 1, back up, or all 3 backups. Turn 2, play the Refia, get the Refia spin ready. If they go for the Emet-Selch Hythlodaeus on that turn, the Emet-Selch can target the Refia. Refia has to fire in response, targeting the Hythlodaeus to get it back in the deck, at which point the Goblin can haste the Hythlodaeus, and the Hythlodaeus can start the combo. So it really reduces the number of forwards that actually have a way to interact with this combo. Similarly, something like Ishtola can't. You can have the board wipe suspended over the Hythlodaeus player's head, but the Hythlodaeus player will always have the first priority to make sure the Hythlodaeus resolves at least once, at which point they can hit like double Cindy, let the board wipe resolve, or Cindy, let the board wipe resolve, and then Regis try it again. As far as things to counterplay this deck goes, there's a couple of them. A lot of which I don't love. First one, you have to Amaterasu the Realm. If you do this, the Realm kind of says like you discard, both players discard 3 cards, which is like not great for either player, but you kind of assume you're going to have better cards in hand than your opponent, given that their deck is meant to do one thing, and if they can't do that thing, it's probably not going to win. And now, but you still have to find removal because there's a good chance next turn they could still go Emet-Selch Hythlodaeus, and then they have to dare you to kill the Hythlodaeus that turn, or you can just lose the game on the spot. Other things that I have found that you can do, if you can clear the Cleon with something cheap like a Kusith, something like a Medine, you can then interact with cards that would kill the Hythlodaeus on the stack of gaining haste. You can do something like a Mist Dragon on a Regis entry is particularly decent. Hilariously, Hythlodaeus is a annoying problem for the deck because they can't clear the Hythlodaeus. It makes the combo take an extra turn, so if you can go Hythlodaeus and then kill the Hythlodaeus with something, which is easier said than done, you can actually fizzle the combo that way. Hythlodaeus is a really expensive and kind of scary way to go about that, but Lightning doesn't have a ton of options to do this. The other best one like that is I have found you can do something like Ace to dull the Hythlodaeus down, which does discard 2 cards from your hand, but it does give you a turn to kill the Hythlodaeus without using summons. You can do a Witch of the Fens with 3 monsters will do it. Or I guess 2 if you kill the Emet-Selch on the Emet-Selch search effect. It's not ideal, but like you can go like turn 1 Realm, get like a Sahagin and a Cleon of your own, and then play turn 2 Witch, and then send both of those to, or not Sahagin, Apkalu. Draw a card off of your Cleon dying, kill the Emet-Selch, and they're kind of dead in the water there. So you just have to find ways that aren't summons that can pop the Hythlodaeus in response to what he's doing. Or you can kill the Emet-Selch. Killing in general, you want to kill the Hythlodaeus over the Emet-Selch because if the Hythlodaeus sticks around, if they top deck Emet-Selch, they can play it, and then before you have a chance to do anything, they can Hythlodaeus away the Emet-Selch, and you kind of are like in a really bad spot. Other cards that you can do, I've seen some talk about this Leviathan coming back into the meta a bit, especially off of Yuna. You can like turn 1 Yuna, if you can get the Cleon off the field, you can then Leviathan to cancel it, and they go kind of down 2 forwards and feel really, really bad. I don't know how realistic it is. I feel like this card lacking a burst is going to make it a lot worse than even something like Opus 1 Leviathan would, but I would still pick a place into this card up anyway. In particular for Nationals, which is a 2-deck format, I think decks are going to be really stretched for water cards between them. Water just tends to be a better way to handle both of these decks. You can't burst out of the Hythlo deck, unfortunately, but I do think that is like one of the things that you can do. Other bits of counterplay. Discard. The Hythlodaeus deck, if it goes for a realm, needs every card in hand except for 1. It can hold 1 card in hand. if you start forcing discard or dull freezes, maybe you go like a Laswell on a backup. The deck can actually really struggle into that kind of pressure. Against something like Knights, for instance, it may not even have time to do like the realm. It may have to like hard draw its own haste with like stuff like Corals. It's like a Laswell can just be like such a problem for the deck to actually get all of its things on the field and win the game. Yeah, I think that just about covers it. If you don't like hearing Ghoul talk about like game design and like what I would do, um, you can go ahead and like leave the video now. Those are kind of like the tips that like I would say to deal with those two cards. But I'm not gonna lie, I really think that Hythlo in particular is a deck that should prompt a response from Hobby Japan and Square Enix at some point. Let me look at uh, Final Fantasy TCG organized play. I'm actually curious when the nationals are for North America. I would do the Australian one, but it's all done on Facebook, which is a little trickier. North American Championship is September 21st and 22nd. I really don't know that there are two decks that can beat Chaos consistently enough for me to be happy, and without playing like Chaos Mirrors, which I think is like sounds kind of miserable. I'm not gonna lie, I really don't like the low agency that Chaos gives you. Like gives both players honestly. Like there's so few decisions made in a aggro game with Chaos in it. It's like you go first, you play a backup. They play Chaos, special twice, mill 20 cards. You take 2 damage, then 2 more damage. Hope to hit a burst. You choose what 2 cards to discard. So that's your second decision. It's like, okay, what do I discard? You get 1 turn to make a decision and how to respond, and then maybe like 1 more decision after that, and then you're dead. If you think about that compared to like a control mirror, there's a lot of decisions at all points trying to maintain hand advantage and make decisions, and there just is time for those decisions to matter. In Chaos, every decision matters a lot, partly because there's so few of them being made. And I think there's honestly even fewer decisions being made on the part of the Chaos player. It's literally just like Searcher, Chaos, Special, hope to draw into Gilgamesh to end the game. I really don't like that play pattern. That's a massive oversimplification. Obviously, the good players of the deck are going to be a lot better at it than the ones that are not good. That's true of any deck in the game, though. The difference between a good Knights player and a bad Knights player is night and day. The difference between a good Refugee Control Pilot and a bad Refugee Control Pilot. Like, the reason why Mike won so many events and so many other Refugee pilots struggled to convert into top 4s is because the difference in Refugee piloting is huge. Good players play those decks so effectively. And I worry that Chaos, the gap between a good Refugee player and a bad Refugee player is massive. And the gap between a good Chaos player and a bad Chaos player is less massive. Just by the nature of what the deck is and what it does. And I just feel like, especially the EX pool, is going to start getting stretched really thin. There's only so many EX, like you can only play Levy 6 in one deck in a 2-deck format. So which means that one of your decks can't run it, which then means like you have to like hit Odin to like pop the Chaos is like your best bet at that point. 9K is a really difficult number to hit on a burst. Even something like Remora, you go turn 1 backup, you go to 4 in hand, you discard 2 to the Chaos entry. I guess if you take the damage, if the exact point of damage that you get the Remora is one of the Chaos specials, you can kill the Chaos. That's a very big if for like that Remora. And I think it's a really big struggle for the design team to make a deck work with Chaos. Because like I said, the EX pool is so small compared to everything else. And you have to be playing 20 to 25 bursts to consistently hit 2 bursts, 3 bursts in a game. I think you have to beat that deck. There were 7 bursts in the entirety of Opus 23. If I go further back to the previous set, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8 bursts. Like, you're releasing 120 cards, but 8 of them are going to get so much more prominence because they have the little EX symbol in the top right corner, which is probably not where the game should be heading, where it's like only the really good cards with that burst are played. And I'm really worried that that's the direction the game is going to end up going for control piles. Is whatever the best control engine is, and then throw 25 of the best other cards that happen to have EX in the corner. As far as what I would do for chaos, there's a couple of options. You can limit chaos to 1 and try to just. This is the OCG philosophy of make it inconsistent enough where it'll sack you on occasion, but OCG and Yu-Gi-Oh has a history of like limiting problem cards, and like because they don't want to ban things. And the downside of that is if your opponent like still opens like Larsa Chaos plus Chaos in hand, it's the exact same deck. Just they're gonna do it 20% less often, which maybe that's enough. Maybe that like is enough to like to keep it out of contention to be taken to events. But it does mean that like when you find someone that plays that, it feels really really bad. It's why I'm really not a fan of limiting something like Neo X Death, for instance. But I don't really want Chaos to go away either. I think that, like a limit still probably would not hurt this card. It's a little annoying that it would have a special and you have to run other Chaoses for. But I think that like monster decks really enjoy the boost that Chaos provides. If I was in charge of it, I would probably ban Raijin. I think the fact that the Fujin Raijin combo represents 2 points of damage specifically because of this guy is the part of the deck that I think is the problem in a way. It's that like because if you special twice, you usually end up with like 22, 23 cards left in deck. You actually like don't have much left. But the fact that you also like get to just turn 2 cards in hand into haste 2 CP 9k first strikers is actually a big deal. And it sucks that like I really just don't. I think this is like a hit that doesn't hit a legend, so you don't ban a legend card. I guess the deck is still probably like playable with like 3. You go like 3 Fujin, and then you like try to spike Gilgameshes to do stuff. But I think it just gives control decks more time that doesn't involve playing 8 million EX bursts, and maybe it does enough to kind of soften the blow a little bit. I still, like I said, I would limit chaos if I was in charge of the game, but people don't like when I do stuff like that. My ban list video got a lot of people that make fun of me to this day, saying like, "Go, just ban everything." It's like, no, I really want powerful things in the game. I just want to be able to play the game, and yeah. Hythlodaeus is a interesting one. I almost wonder if this was printed at hero rarity as a panic button. I think Hythlodaeus is the most problematic comp or card in the game since like the Keto Barley or like Stern Leonis stuff. It has a lot of shades of cards and combo decks in other games that I think all have proven to be problematic. So I really think if I'm in charge, what I would do, I don't want people to feel burned. We have Materia Cups in Raleigh on the 24th and 25th. There is a Materia Cup in Adelaide the weekend after. I would put a ban list into effect immediately following the Adelaide Materia Cup. I think you have to unfortunately let both of these decks rock for that time frame because you need people to feel that their investment into cards like Regis, maybe people probably have just spent $50 to $60 on playsets of Regis to play this deck. They need a chance to be able to play this at a large event. That gives them that opportunity. But I don't think this is a deck that is. I think this is a deck that could cause problems and cause people to leave the game, and we really can't afford that. But you also don't want to make the players that invested into the deck mad. That gives them 2 large events in the US, 1 large event in Australia. I don't know what EU looks like. Let's take a look real quick and just see. That gives them Benelux and Spain, or Benelux as well, um, for one more materia cap there. So yeah, after the 1st of September is when I would put this into effect. Honestly, I would just ban Hythlodaeus. I really don't think there's a healthy way for this card or deck to exist. It reminds me a bit of if Nadu in Magic. I'm going to pull up Nadu. If you haven't read this card, and it reminds me of the play pattern reminds me of Lunalight Orchest in Yu-Gi-Oh, which would go through a card called Outer Entity Azathoth before committing to its combo. I think this is probably an easier one to read. So let's talk a little bit about Nadu. I'm trying to see if I can find the image. I tried to do this last time I recorded the video. Nadu is a nightmare of a card. Without going too in-depth on Magic the Gathering, Nadu is a very similar combo deck that intends to go turn 1, play a card. Turn 2, go, okay, play a second, play a backup, we'll call it a monster. Turn 2, play a second backup, play a forward. Turn 3, Nadu, and the game is over, effectively. Nadu gives all of your stuff this weird ability where twice per turn per forward, you get to reveal the top card of your deck and free play it if it's a backup, and if it's not a backup, you just get to add it to your hand. This draws your entire deck as early as turn 3. Or even earlier, I guess, if you find a mana dork. That's now by itself. Okay, well you can interact with the Nadu. What makes Nadu such a frustrating card is the actual play pattern of Nadu. Nadu creates what's called a non-deterministic combo, which is Nadu from that point is not guaranteed to work. He will work, I think, something like 85 to 90% of the time the first time you start the combo on an optimized deck list. However, your opponent, once the combo starts, is incentivized to make you play out this combo until you've demonstrated that it's just not going to fail anymore. And the optimal way to play Nadu didn't even play a win condition. You would just loop Nadu about 8 times. You would blow up your own lands, shuffle them back into the deck, do it again. You would have 8,000 creatures on field, and you'd blow up all of your opponent's lands, and you would win the game. And it sucks. It actually, I think the viewership for the grand finals of the Magic Pro Tour that Nadu won ended up dropping in viewership for the grand finals because top 4 was all Nadu players, and this deck is a nightmare. I actually encourage you, because it's just interesting sometimes to learn about problematic cards in other card games. But the way they had to resolve it on stream was really funny. They had this separate test card. It was a 0 on the right, a 1 in the middle, and a 2 on the left. And everything that you would do, you would target your own stuff twice in a row. So you'd move it to the middle and it was targeted once, and move it to the left when it had been targeted again, and you would just keep going. And it took forever. Matches were really long. They were really drawn out. It wasn't very fun to watch. Hythlodaeus has a very similar problem, which is that the opponent still has to resolve everything in these very complicated turns properly for the deck to do it. So you're incentivized to sit there and play it out. But at Nationals, at a 2-deck format, you have 70 minutes between all 3 games. Say that someone starts the combo, fails it, loses that game, they're going to do it again in the next one. And that combo then can go quite long. It can be very difficult to resolve. They have to think about how to resolve their stuff in order. It ends up being a bad play experience for both players. The second thing is the Cleone interaction. It reminds me a lot, unfortunately, of in Yu-Gi-Oh! This card called Outer Entity Azathoth. So what this card does is once you've started your combo, the first thing you would do is make this. And you could just take basically any 2 level 4 monsters, slap them into 1 Xyz, slap that Xyz, this on top of that one, And effectively, for the rest of the turn, your opponent could not interact with you. You basically said your opponent can't cast summons, and they can't even like. You know, Yu-Gi-Oh obviously would have like its own like equivalent to Amaterasu, but Azathoth is like, you know how like Sarah doesn't start a chain in Final Fantasy, or like, it doesn't like cause something to enter the stack. So like it just like things lose 5,000 power, and there's no response window. That's what Azathoth does, except for like you can't cast summons. And the Cleone thing is a lot like this, in that it really turns off that interaction and the ways that you could, in theory, counterplay what the deck is doing. Because if Cleone isn't there, every single thing you do would potentially stop this. You could Odin on top of the Goblin choosing the Hythlodaeus. You could Lev 6 it. You could Cucullin it on the stack to turn off its abilities. Um, Maybe you could ban Cleone if you don't want to ban Hythlodaeus. I just like don't like that, because then they'll start doing stuff that's even stupider, like running the Fiend or like General Leo. Honestly, like making the combo slower makes it bad, but doesn't make it like less of a problem when it actually goes off and resolves, which I think is the thing that scares me the most about Hythlodaeus. I do think that this is a card they future-proofed a tiny bit by printing it hero. They're very reticent to ban legends. I think this is a card that is like legend level text, but printed at hero partly in case it was a problem. I think that Moschery and Stern are the other cards that I'm pretty sure almost are like universally more powerful than like anything else they printed. But they printed them at lower rarity in part because they wanted to be able to ban them if they needed to. And I think the Hythlodaeus is the closest we've had to the Guido Barley thing, which is probably the fastest they've really taken action to ban things. I think Stern lasted a full set. I don't think Guido Barley did, because Guido Barley was like a true oversight of like, oh shit, we screwed this up. Sorry guys. Um, so yeah, those are my thoughts, my ramblings. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please don't like take this as a negative thing or a negative video. I love this game. I love playing it. I think it's really interesting to figure out how to beat these decks. I've spent a lot of time actually. I was messaging Ryan. Uh, I messaged Ryan to wish him well, and he messaged me like, "I don't know what to do against Hythlodaeus combo deck. Like, I think this is my worst matchup." And I kind of went through some scenarios and just tried to map out like, "Hey, these are like your options for what you can do to try to combat it." That was a lot of fun, really interesting. I think that it like furthered my knowledge of the deck as well, which is cool. Like both decks, like I learned more about like what Mono Earth can do into this. Because Mono Earth is a deck that could struggle to interact because there is no Amaterasu like effect to stop the realm. But I do think that like it's something that I hope is dealt with in a manner that doesn't harm the game long term, which unfortunately means that probably a couple Materia Cups do have to leave these legal for them. Yeah, I kind of talked with Travis about this a bit, and Travis laughed because I mentioned this to him, but I do think that like the problematic and the scary thing about aggro doing this. I guess we're gonna talk a little bit longer. Sorry. You guys get to just enjoy me yapping for a little bit. The problematic thing about doing this is I think it really restricts design space in what decks can be good in the future. I'm going to take the Wind Legends this set as a huge example. I think Wind has gotten basically shafted on Legends since I think like the last really good Wind Legend was, I guess Yuffie was like the last one I could think of, and like Yuffie is like a very specific and weird card. Um, but like the Wind Legends, okay. Let's take Adele. Adele is a card that is asking you to develop a large number of characters on your side of the field to be good. That is, if you're activating one character, she is worse than like the one cost Vaughn that activates a character on entry. If you're activating, 5 characters, okay, like all your backups, 3 CP, activate all your backups, being able to do that multiple times is actually pretty good, right? But you have to be able to get to that point. And the fastest way of building backups in Mono Wind, if you go Sam, Fat Chocobo, Carpenter, you're dead. And Adele is a card that just doesn't have text because there is no counterplay to wind to what the Chaos deck is doing. I have a Retainer Storm deck that I love and I would consider for the Continentals, but I'm not gonna lie, I'm really not very excited to take it to an event because I don't think it can beat the Chaos deck, and I don't think it can beat the Hythlo combo deck. I think those are massively problematic for the deck. And granted, whatever you think of my Retainer Storm decks, maybe those aren't healthy either, like the way that Storm plays. But that let's say that okay, maybe not a Storm payload, but Hope. Hope is a cool card that you're intended to turn one back up, turn two Hope, turn three Warp Hope, turn four Hope comes back. I think that's like the only way that I'm really excited to play Hope is if he gets to activate his ability twice, or has the chance to. But again, like Chaos just incidentally like screws over a card like Hope from even functioning. You have to like really go out of your way now to like run EX Burst and Amaterasu, and even if you do that, Hope isn't going to be resolving twice because the game is going to be over with or without whatever Hope does for the most part. Like the first time you play Hope is the only time it matters, and that's that. Like, isn't that kind of crappy? Like, I just feel like it restricts the design space. Like the idea that like a turn two or turn three kill and the game is over deck exists to this degree, this consistency, and this level of like really making it difficult to play against. Wind in particular is really lacking for good EX bursts. I've tried to build a deck that like I think would function with like 20 wind EX bursts and like a storm payload, and I think it's okay. I think I got 20 bursts in there, but like you're playing some really strange things. You're playing like the Vieira backup engine as opposed to like the clearly better engine just because Jote has a burst. You're playing cards like Madam M as another backup. You're playing a card like Echo to try to get like the thing. Like there's no like Lena, King Tycoon level of like really strong backups that you can play in Mono Wind, which again, Mono Wind is apparently something they want you to play because Adele and Ace exist, right? So I just think that like it's just hard to play some of the decks that I think would be really fun and interesting because some of these exist, and that's always going to be the case. I really loved the Golbez deck in Opus 19, and the Golbez deck is a deck that was going to, by the design nature and the fact that it didn't release a bunch of pushed art streams with it, was always going to be about tier 2.5, tier 2, tier 3. But that deck was a lot of fun, had a lot of merit, did cool things, and I think a lot of the reasons to play a deck like that go away when these turn 2, aggro decks or turn 3 combo kill decks exist in the format. Especially ones that are this difficult to interact with what they do. The effect that like Chaos entering the field, you don't really want to Amaterasu it because you're already discarding 2 cards anyway. It doesn't kill the forward. You don't want to canceling specials is very difficult to do, so on and so forth. But yeah, that's just kind of me ranting and talking. I promise I'm done now. Again, thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you guys enjoyed this kind of a different style of video, just talking about things. And yeah, like I said, I'm having a lot of fun with the set, both with and without those decks. Like I actually spent a lot of time goldfishing the Hythlodaeus deck. I will say, very fun. It is awesome to goldfish that deck. All of your decisions matter. You miss sometimes based on your own merits. I really don't want to sit across from it at a tournament. And I'm going to I'm okay with it, for especially for like locals and like even at like Materia Cups. Like play what wins games and what you enjoy. I just want what I enjoy to be playable. And I think that the decks like this existing are going to eventually push those out of playability. That's all. Thanks for watching, everybody. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.